Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast. I'm John Macri, joined, as always, by PFF's lead fantasy analyst, Nathan Jahnke. Nate, it's a new week, but the rookie discussions keep on rolling here because we're talking rookie sleepers in Dynasty rookie drafts today. I'm looking forward to it. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, excited. Still have dynasty drafts going on. Still have some that haven't started yet. Plenty of them where you get the first round or two done and then people start to lose interest a little bit. So the drafts start lingering on, which is perfect for what we're talking about today because hopefully some of these guys will still be available in those leagues for you.
Yeah, for sure. I know I got at least one that's still going that started up right around when the draft finished. And yeah, you're right. It absolutely dies down. The timer, we've a few people time out at this point just because the interest isn't there as much as it was with those early rounds. So yeah, like you said, hopefully we can help people identify some of these kind of later round sleepers. And then that's kind of what we're going to focus on today. We're going to look at players who are going outside, or rookies specifically, who are going outside the top 24 in Fantasy Pros consensus rankings. So the third round of rookie drafts and beyond, essentially talk about, why we like their chances of emerging as fantasy relevant. Obviously success rates for these later rookies is never going to be as high as with those early round guys. So they aren't going to profile as strongly, but we still found some players that we like that hopefully have a path to get there and get a chance at the next level. So I'm looking forward to talking about our names here. But before we get into all that, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Fabric by Gerber Life. The new year is a perfect time to reevaluate financial goals, not just for yourself, but for your kids. Now is the perfect time to make sure your kids are on a path toward a solid financial future. A kid's investment account from Fabric by Gerber Life is quick and simple to set up and lets you invest in their future now for education, big milestones, and more. Fabric by Gerber Life is designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a kid's investment account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. Kids can't invest when they're minors, but a kid's investment account allows you to invest on their behalf now, giving their investments more time to grow. It's all online, and setting up an account can take you just 5 minutes. Then you can manage your child's account and monitor their investments right from your phone. Funds can be used for nearly anything, benefiting your child from tuition and tutors to music classes. And when they're adults and out on their own, they can use the funds for anything they need. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child today at meetfabric.com/fantasy. That's meetfabric.com/fantasy, meetfabric.com/fantasy. Portfolios managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors, Inc. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, Nate, let's start things off with your first rookie sleeper. You've gone with DJ Giddens out of Kansas State, now with the Indianapolis Colts, drafted in the 5th round, currently going as RB 12 and 35th overall, according to Fantasy Pros consensus ranking. We talked a little bit about Giddens pre-draft. I thought he was an interesting player then as well. What do you think about him now that he's drafted by the Colts?
Yeah, I still think he's an interesting player. We had him in the top 100 of our big board heading into the draft, so we as a company liked him in general as a running back. I feel like he's one of the players that, because this draft class was so strong at running back, that probably pushed him down a little bit. Would not have been at all surprised had he been in last year's draft. He would have been maybe a 4th round pick or something like that, but goes in the 5th round. To the Indianapolis Colts, consistently graded between 86 and 90 in terms of his grade at Kansas State. Also had a decent enough yards per route run, wasn't excellent, but also wasn't anything terrible. Part of the reason I like him is because of the Colts depth chart. They have Jonathan Taylor as the lead running back, but outside of that, they added Khalil Herbert, who bounced around a little bit last year, and then they still have Tyler Goodson as a backup. So I think, first off, the receiving role, I think, is wide open. Jonathan Taylor at times has had that role, but hasn't really done much on third downs. They've changed who they've had at third downs at times, so I think Giddens at least has a chance to win that third down role, even though I don't think that's his strength, but I also don't think that's the strength of anyone on the roster. So I think there is a chance for immediate playing time. And then I also think there's a chance that he can win the backup job. He would basically just have to beat out Khalil Herbert, and Jonathan Taylor is someone who has missed a decent amount of time these last 2 seasons. There's been 3 different stretches where he's missed 3 to 4 games. So in that case, Giddens could be the clear lead back in those games. And even then, I think there's a chance Giddens could just earn some playing time on offense. Jonathan Taylor was excellent early on in his career, but he slowly but surely had a worse PFF run grade. Particularly this last year, he did have a number of big runs and was in the top 5 or so in terms of rushing attempts, so his cumulative stats were still very good. But he only earned a positive run grade on 38.4% of his runs. That ranked 40th out of 47 running backs with at least 100 carries. A lot of the guys that he was ahead of are backup running backs, so he hasn't been as effective. Certainly a chance that that has been the injuries that have just hindered his ability to play well, but there's a chance Taylor also doesn't rebound from those injuries. We've seen plenty of times where running backs just get less effective over the course of their career because of injuries they've had, and that could be the case for Taylor. So I think there's a chance Giddens could just earn playing time, even if Jonathan Taylor is available. So there's a lot of ways that Giddens can receive playing time, and he probably wouldn't be a fantasy starter unless Jonathan Taylor suffered an injury. But I think there will be the opportunities for the Colts offensive staff to earn more trust in Giddens from that playing time. And the Colts just have a strong offensive line as well. So if Giddens is a starter, he's being put in a good position to succeed because of that offensive line.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I'm with you. Like, I don't think there should be much question about Giddens kind of as like the RB2 for the Colts. Like some of those other options, like you mentioned, not overly inspiring. I think he's kind of the most logical handcuff to Jonathan Taylor at this point. Like you mentioned, comes out of college, pretty encouraging rushing profile. Even like his career 93.4 rushing grade, 84th percentile since 2017. So yeah, I worry a little bit about receiving potential. Obviously, I don't think there's a ton of upside in that offense specifically if Anthony Richardson's at quarterback. I figure he'll more likely, Richardson specifically more likely to take off and run than dump off to the running back. So not like it's going to be like 3-4 catches per game or anything like that. But, with Giddens, like you mentioned, he was at least efficient with his opportunities as a receiver coming out of college, like that 1.24 yards per route run, 66 percentile. That's not bad. He has some experience there. He's got some potential if he does get that third down role. So yeah, it's just Jonathan Taylor kind of being in the way, right? And that's going to be the case with all these sleeper running backs at this point. Like nobody's a clear lead back, and Taylor's under contract until I think 2027, I believe, and still, a good running back. I know last year's rushing grades were kind of like the worst of his career, but still, like you said, put up over 1,400 yards on the ground. Really seemed to kind of hit his stride again, like late last year with 4 straight 100+ yard games to close out the year. I think there's some juice left there, but I wouldn't be surprised if Giddens eats into his workload a little bit more, even just to keep Taylor fresh so he doesn't have to carry it 25 plus times per game like he was doing near the end of the last season. I think there was a few games over 30 carries, which was crazy. So I don't think they want to give him that workload for an entire season. So I could see Giddens getting on the field here quite a bit, and yeah, at the very least, the handcuff to Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, I'll add like Khalil Herbert. I did like him earlier in his career, so I wouldn't say it's guaranteed Giddens gets the backup job. So there's that. And for me, like the third down job isn't going to give him a fantasy position. Most third down backs aren't fantasy relevant unless they have a bigger role than that. But I think it could give him a chance to earn the trust of the offensive coordinator and the head coach and everything if he makes some plays in the passing game, and then that could lead to more work on early downs.
I like it. All right, next up, another running back here. I went with Tahj Brooks out of Texas Tech. So he was a 6th round pick in this year's draft for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's currently going as RB 18 and 44th overall on the Fantasy Pros consensus rank. So a deeper sleeper here for sure. And, as a result, I do think that Chase Brown can be considered kind of a major winner coming out of this year's draft after the Bengals. They were one of the teams rumored to be interested in running back relatively early. The team chose to wait until the 6th round, which was, I think, great news for Brown's lead back potential again in 2025. But that being said, there was still, I think, a need for the Bengals to add some help with Samaje Perine and Zach Moss kind of being these uninspiring backups on the depth chart right now, which I think gives Brooks a chance to carve out a role as a backup and potential handcuff to Brown in 2025. Like Tahj Brooks doesn't offer much receiving upside coming out of college, though he's been incredibly productive as a runner these past 2 seasons at Texas Tech. He's delivered over 1,500 rushing yards in back-to-back seasons. Interestingly, his college profile isn't all that different from Chase Brown himself. And while Brown offered a little bit more receiving potential, he too was a day 3 pick over 1,000 rushing yards in his final college season. They're almost identical in size, and now they land in that same kind of backfield. So for me, like the sleeper value with Brooks is almost entirely based on his handcuff potential for Chase Brown at this point, which is at least a shorter path to being a starter than most day three backs. He's another one, that doesn't offer much encouragement as a receiving back. Like I said, comes out of college just 0.53 yards per route run. That's seventh percentile since 2017. But at the same time, like just the pure volume player that he played for Texas Tech, those past few years, he was definitely out there on passing downs and had some production. There was even a game against, I think, Oklahoma State, I think it was, where he had like 9 catches on 10 targets. He hasn't had fewer than 25 receptions in each of his past 3 years. So not impossible that he can get a few snaps there, but I'm ultimately treating him more as kind of the Chase Brown handcuff, because I don't think Samaje Perine or Zach Moss make as good of options as that RB2 for Cincinnati right now. Perine more as that kind of receiving option, and then after Moss being as ineffective as he was last year, 3.3 yards per carry, 55.4 rushing grade, I'm not surprised to see the Bengals address the position. I thought they might do so earlier, but for Chase Brown's sake, I'm glad they didn't. So I like Tahj Brooks here as a potential handcuff to grab late in rookie drafts.
Yeah, I thought he was interesting. It sounded like after the combine, the Bengals wanted a bigger back, and that didn't end up happening. Brooks is a lot, like you said, similar to Brown, so seems like a handcuff to Brown. They do have Zach Moss on the roster, and they did restructure his contract, so it looks like Moss will be on the roster at least this season. So I think that complicates things a little bit. The Bengals have had 4 running backs on the roster before, so I wouldn't be surprised if all 4 of them end up making the roster. As you said, Perine, more of a receiving back. I think he's just in that role. That'll be his role, regardless of what happens on early downs. If Brown suffers an injury, I don't think Perine influences that. So I think it would need to be an injury to Brown, and then he would need to surpass Moss on the depth chart. So it does take a couple of things, but if that does happen, we've seen whoever lines up in the Bengals backfield have a ton of fantasy value, because the Bengals offense is one of the best offenses in the NFL. They score a ton of points, and some of those points will come on rushing touchdowns. And since everyone is so focused on the pass game, and that'll continue to be the case, that makes it easier on the running backs in the Bengals backfield. So I definitely like this situation if he is able to get into that starting lineup. And the Bengals also they're remarkably easy to predict this season because of how little changes they've made on offense. They have the same wide receivers, they have the same coaching staff. This is the one change they made at running back. They have the same tight ends, so everything should be fairly similar. So it's just he needs to get in that starting position. It would take a lot to get there, but anyone who's a 4th round dynasty rookie pick, it's going to take a lot for them to be a starter. But in the case that Brooks does become a starter, he would be a fantasy starter.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard, right? Like these guys, late day 3 picks, like it's never going to be an immediate path to snaps for them at the next level, regardless of the depth chart. But yeah, like you said, I like the situation there in the Cincinnati Bengals offense, and specifically with Zach Moss being as poor as he was last year. I think there's at least a path to bounce Zach Moss on the depth chart as RB2, but we'll see how things kind of go here as the offseason unrolls. But let's cover some wide receivers next year, Nate. And your wide receiver sleeper pick was Pat Bryant, a 3rd round pick out of Illinois, going as wide receiver 13 and 34th overall on Fantasy Pros consensus ranks. What do you like about Bryant landing with the Denver Broncos?
A lot of it just has to do with the situation in Denver. It looked like through his time at Illinois, where he was the highest graded wide receiver we have ever seen out of that college, because they are not necessarily always known for their offense, but the fact that Brian was able to do well in that offense is impressive in itself. Looked like a clear X wide receiver coming out of college, does well against man coverage, has the size of an X receiver, plays better on the outside. But also Denver just tends to like taller wide receivers. Sean Payton, that was with the same thing with him back with the Saints as well. So I don't know if he'll necessarily be an X. There might be an opportunity for him to play on in other situations as well. Could see him playing a lot on early downs because of his ability to block. The big thing that could potentially give him fantasy value is I think there's at least a chance he can get to the point where he is the top wide receiver in Denver, where a lot of other rookies outside of the first round, there's not a path for them to be the top wide receiver. They invested more in Bryant than they did their rookie wide receivers last season. Marvin Mims has just been a rotational player, so he's arguably the most that this coaching staff and regime have invested in a wide receiver since they've joined there. And Cortland Sutton is someone who is just consistently grading between a 69 and 76 offensive grade over the past 5 years. That's much more well suited as a number 2 wide receiver. He basically peaked in 2019. His grades were in the 80s back then. Will be 30 by the end of this season. So I think if Bryant plays well, there's a path to him to be the top receiver in this offense. The coaching staff compared him to Michael Thomas, which that's kind of a big, lofty comparison to make there. But if they're already comparing him to Thomas, that shows that they like him. And we have seen third-round wide receivers become the top wide receiver options on their team relatively early on. Cooper Kupp, Terry McLaurin, Nico Collins, other wide receivers who former third-round picks that it only took a year or two for them to be a clear top wide receiver on their teams.
Yeah, I like Bryant. He was on the fringe of kind of making my original sleeper list, and then basically the only thing that kept him out was my still belief in Troy Franklin. I know he got some opportunities last year, right? Bo Nix missed him on a few big plays that I think would have really created a lot more optimism around his rookie year. But I think that another offseason will hopefully gets another shot to start. But yeah, back to Bryant. Like ultimately, I like him. I think he's a good bet to make among this year's crop of rookie sleepers and even this Denver receiving core, right? Like it was great to see, Cortland Sutton find more consistent fantasy success last season, but he also seems to get named in like trade rumors quite a bit. And I think his contract is up at the end of this season. So who knows if he's going to be a long-term option there still beyond this year. Right now, it's kind of this kind of hodgepodge wide receiver room with some good interesting crop of talent like Devon Vele and, like you said, Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin, Pat Bryant, where they're all solid, maybe not necessarily number 1 wide receivers. At least it doesn't seem like it. So, why not Bryant? But also at the same time, you could say, why not the other guys too? But yeah, either way, like he's absolutely worth a shot as a sleeper because at worst, like Bryant probably has an equal shot to emerge as a starter for Denver within that group. And at best, like considering the day 2 capital on him, he probably could be the favorite. So I'm happy to buy into that later in rookie drafts here for sure.
I can confirm his Sutton's contract is done by the end of this year. They added a bunch of void years, so he's not going anywhere this year. It would be a ton of dead money if they did that, but yeah, he's still on the roster for at least this year.
Yeah. So, okay. So yeah, there could be some room here if they move on from Sutton beyond this season. All right. My wide receiver sleeper pick, I went with Tory Horton out of Colorado State. He got drafted in the 5th round by the Seattle Seahawks. He's going as wide receiver 16 and 45th overall on Fantasy Pros consensus rankings. And I know that the Seahawks have 2 very capable kind of slot-centric wide receivers in Jackson Smith and Jigba and Cooper Kupp. And while both players will likely have to spend some time outside to make room for the other, this offense needs a quality, full-time outside wide receiver as well. So, it is a different offense than what we saw last year with Clint Kubiak coming in, because Seattle, they spent, I think, like 77% of their snaps in 11 personnel last year, which was like a top 5 rate, but and a big uptick from them for years past. But Clint Kubiak coming in will run most likely a lot more 12 and 21 personnel. But I do think some of the head coaching tendencies might bleed into the offense and defense as well. So don't see them being like bottom of the league in 11 personnel like the Saints were under Kubiak last year either. So maybe somewhere in between is the hopeful path here. The Saints, at the same time last year with Kubiak, were also suffering from like a major shortage at wide receiver last year with no Shaheed and no Olave for the second half of the year. So Horton, he was only a 5th round pick. There'll be room for the team to upgrade there at some point if he doesn't hit the ground running. He at least has a shot for me, at least to earn that role as a rookie, as one of the outside wide receivers there. You look at his college production profile. He entered 2024 having already posted 2 seasons of over 1,100 yards, but missed much of this past season with with an injury, despite being on pace to set a new career high in yards per route run in 2024. He was able to partake in the NFL Combine. He even ran a 4.41 40-yard dash and hopefully put aside some of the injury concerns. He's had success against single coverage in college. I think that helps him, when considering the attention that Jackson Smith and Jigba and Cooper Kupp are likely to draw. So his primary competition right now on the outside is like Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who, continues to get chances, kind of fails to impress. So it wouldn't be a surprise to, if that kind of continues in 2024 for MVS. I hope it opens up an opportunity for a rookie like Tory Horton to emerge as a starting option in those three wide receiver sets. I also liked Ricky White, who they added late as well. So it's not an ideal path to snaps, but it's one that I could at least envision for Horton to kind of get on the field at some point and hopefully make an impact.
Yeah, I think there's a similar thing to DJ Giddens and how he could potentially play on third downs. And even though that doesn't make him fantasy relevant, that ideally gives him the opportunity to play well and then earn more snaps. I think Horton similarly has an opportunity to get on the field, maybe not in the most ideal fantasy situations, but then earn more snaps. Like you said, we expect to see a lot more 12, 21 personnel. They converted two of their tight ends to fullback, so they definitely want that 21 personnel on the field. So two wide receivers, like you said, two of them have been slot receivers. Valdez-Scantling, more of a deep threat receiver. They need receivers who can block on those run plays. And Horton, we gave him 10 out of 10 on competitive toughness in our draft guide. The very willing blocker, so I could see Horton winning some of those snaps on early downs over some of these other players like Cooper Kupp. Yeah, he's been an every down receiver in the past, but they probably want to limit his playing time at least somewhat with his age. So I could see him earning that playing time on early downs. Yeah, they'll be running a lot of the time, but they will have to pass some of those times, in which case Horton will be one of the top receiving options on the field. So if he does well on those early snaps, I could see that earning him more time in three wide receiver sets where I would expect it to be more Valdez-Scantling, Cooper Kupp, and Jackson Smith and Jigba in some kind of orientation. So I think there's a chance he gets on the field, and I think there's a chance that earns him more playing time. And I think it is worth noting there have been plenty of fifth-round wide receivers who have turned out to be great for fantasy. Puka Nacua, Tyreek Hill, Khalil Shakir, Stephon Diggs, Darnell Mooney, all former fifth-round picks. So plenty of fifth-rounders have made it in the NFL in the past.
For sure. Yeah. I'm excited. I'm at least like somewhat hopeful for him. He was a player that I liked kind of coming into the draft as well. I was hoping for, closer to round 4, but I don't think this is the worst situation for him to land in Seattle here. But that gives us now 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers. Naturally, that's going to leave us with 2 tight ends as well. So, Nate, your pick is Mason Taylor, son of Hall of Famer Jason Taylor. He gets drafted by the New York Jets in the second round out of LSU. Currently, tight end 4 and 26th overall on the Fantasy Pros consensus rank. So, just makes the cut for our sleeper conversation today. What do you like about Taylor?
Just the fact that we know he's going to get on the field, we know he's going to get a lot of playing time, should be the starter for the Jets. His only competition for playing time is Stone Smart and Jeremy Ruckert. Ruckert's been on the team for a while as primarily a run blocking option. Smart, coming from the Chargers, had a couple of decent games as a receiver, but really both of those tight ends have grades over the past 3 seasons below 52. We only have 15 tight ends in the NFL with at least 500 snaps over the past 3 years with a grade that low. Most of them are tight end 3s on the roster or worse. None of them are expected to be the primary tight ends for their teams this year. So I think Taylor is going to be that clear number 1 tight end who will be on the field an awful lot, and that'll give him opportunities. They have a new offensive coordinator, used to be a tight end, working with the tight ends with both Sam Laporta and TJ Hawkinson back with the Lions. And then they have Justin Fields as their quarterback. And he had a lot of chemistry with Cole Kmet back in Chicago. And even though Kmet wasn't the highest graded tight end in the world, still had a higher target rate than tight ends of that skill typically have. So even if Taylor is not being the most efficient tight end, I think he's still going to get that playing time and get those targets. And a lot of third round dynasty picks might not ever be a starter in the NFL. And here you have one who is fairly likely to be one in week 1 and throughout his rookie season.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I think, yeah, the best thing for Taylor is that there is this really nice opportunity here with the New York Jets. I know, I'm not Taylor's biggest fan. I think we talked about him in the tight end preview episode, right? And so I'm not like overly excited about him for fantasy. Like, if he is going to have a shot, though, like, it has to be, an opportunity like this where, like you said, the path to snaps is pretty clear for him. They obviously spent a second round draft capital on him. There's potential there. I'm lower on him than consensus. I recognize that people are going to be excited about him because of the draft capital and the Jets' need for a tight end. But yeah, he's not one for me personally. He kind of, I don't know, sits in this group of like other day two picks who didn't work out. Guys like Jelani Woods and Tommy Tremble and Dalton Keene and Cameron Latu as day two picks. Sorry, slightly better than Drew Sample and Trey McKitty. But again, the nice thing here is the opportunity. So I think if they're able to get him involved in the offense and play a volume heavy role, then there's absolutely some opportunity there, especially for the Jets, who are kind of in need of other receiving options to emerge outside of Garrett Wilson. So yeah, like the landing spot here for Taylor at the very least. Okay, let me see here. My tight end is Oronde Gadsden II, who gets drafted much later. He was a fifth round pick out of Syracuse, goes to the Los Angeles Chargers. We didn't do this intentionally, but I think we got a good mix of like typical sleepers and like deep sleepers here for this episode at each position, really. So hopefully that helps give folks in the deeper dynasty leagues, help some identify some targets as well. Because yeah, Gadsden, similar to kind of some of the other sleeper picks that I put here, going outside the top 40 on the Fantasy Pros consensus rankings. He's like tight end 7 and 50th overall over there. So I'm aware that the success rates for these deeper sleepers aren't high, but again, there are some that break through from this range. And when we have to spend late rookie picks and the options dry up in like the fourth and fifth round of rookie drafts, these are the kind of guys that I'll throw darts at. And with Gadsden, for me, looking at his spot with the Chargers, like that tight end room, I think can use like a viable receiving threat to serve as a consistent weapon for Justin Herbert to rely on. And they brought in Tyler Conklin, Will Dissly still on the team. Neither is necessarily like scary enough to keep Gadsden buried on the depth chart for long, considering like he does have this receiving potential coming out of Syracuse. He missed most of the 2023 season, but he posted over 900 receiving yards for Syracuse in 2022 and in 2024, led the team in receiving grade this past year as well. For his career, Gadsden, he's been a pretty strong target earner, efficient with his opportunities. He earned an 85th percentile career yards per route run total at 2.04 for the position. So he was specifically effective as kind of working in more of a receiver role than your typical inline tight end. Like he earned 2.08 yards per route run out of the slot, which was 92nd percentile, and 2.42 yards per route run lined up wide, which was 88th percentile. So the area where Gadsden, I think, will require time to get on the field ahead of guys like Tyler Conklin and Will Dissly is probably more as that inline traditional role and as a blocker, because those weren't kind of clear strengths for him. And considering that the team ran fewer offensive snaps out of 12 personnel, no team ran fewer offensive snaps out of 12 personnel than the Chargers last year. So I think it's going to require patience for if/when he becomes fantasy relevant. But 22 years old, he at least has a receiving profile that can make him one of the more desirable dart throws at the tight end position, at the very least, late in rookie drafts. So he's just a name that I've been kind of keeping an eye on and scooping up pretty late in a lot of rookie drafts and undrafted a lot of the time as well. So like his potential, but understand that, yeah, the low success rate for these late picks here.
Oh, yeah. The big thing is George Kittle was a fifth round tight end who worked out in a very big way. Mm-hmm. The second name that came up was Tyler Conklin. So there were a couple of cases in this episode where the comparison is a guy that we're also talking about, since Khalil Herbert was a sixth round running back who was with the Bengals last year. Now we're talking about a sixth round Bengals running back, and then Herbert went to the Colts, who we talked about. And now Tyler Conklin's the second success story that we have that for Gadsden. So The Chargers, an interesting team in how they use their tight ends. There's like a clear early down tight end, a clear late down tight end. They don't really do that two tight end set like you mentioned because they have the fullback slash defensive lineman Scott Matlock, who sort of plays tight end, but more
Right.
so a fullback. So that's basically what their 12 personnel typically is. So they have the receiving tight end as well, which last year started off as Hayden Hurst. Then Will Disley kind of took over that role. Stone Smart had it for a little bit, and now Tyler Conklin appears to have that role. My only concern is like if something were to happen to Conklin, then maybe they shift Disley back to the receiving tight end again. So it might take two injuries or just Gadsden playing really well in order for him to work his way up the depth chart. And they also have Tucker Fisk, who's a clear blocking tight end, where Gadsden is that clear receiving tight end. Like you said, played better in the slot and almost always lined up in the slot in college as well. A very small percentage of his routes came as an inline tight end compared to most tight ends out of college. So I think Gadsden is pretty clearly tied to that passing down role at tight end, which I believe will be Conklin at least to start with. But the thing here is with the Chargers, the coaching staff has a long history with success with tight end, so that's big. So if he does get that tight end role, he should be successful. Like Will Disley at that time last year was fantasy relevant, even though his career was as a blocking tight end, and Stone Smart even waiver wire target late in the season, even though he was an undrafted free agent. So the receiving role in this offense is very valuable. So if Gadsden is able to get to that role, then there is a chance that he would have fantasy value, which is good.
Yeah, for sure. That's the hope there. And honestly, yeah, I'm not looking at him for 2025 for the most part. Like it's very much like kind of a taxi squad stash at this point, especially considering the draft capital and where you're likely going to get him in rookie drafts. So just being patient with some of these guys and taking a shot on them for those late round dart throws, and hopefully they turn into something eventually. But again, odds are they're probably not. Let's be honest. So yeah, take your shots on your favorite players. Just these are just a few of ours here that we're kind of betting on here late in rookie drafts. But that's it. That's a short one this week. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. If you're watching on the YouTube, please don't forget to like and subscribe. We appreciate that a lot. Nate, thank you to you as well. Please let everybody know what you got going on at pff.com this week.
So I've been getting all the rankings up to date. Had the PPR rankings go up today. We'll have one more update to the Dynasty rookie rankings and Superflex rankings this week. I have also been doing a ton of player profiles. Had 25 player profiles on rookies go up last week. I have another 6 of those going up throughout this week, as well as starting with the veterans starting today and going through these next 2 months. Basically starting the top of ADP and going down from there. So the top 3 wide receivers went up today, and we'll continue going through all of the top players. And then you and I will be back on Wednesday doing a mock draft. So get to see us again this week as we cover more of the rookies. We'll do a super flex rookie mock this time around rather than a normal single quarterback one, since we haven't talked a ton about the quarterbacks since they've been drafted. So good for us to talk a little bit more about some of these quarterbacks.
Yeah, looking forward to that. That'll be fun to kind of run through some of the Superflex paths here for drafts and stuff like that. So this will be good. And then yeah, for me, I'll have actually today the updated IDP Dynasty rankings top 300 are up on the site. I'll have articles for rookie sleepers, which will include a couple more names that we didn't cover today. IDP rookie sleepers, and then all of my rookie rankings are up on PFF.com as well. That's rookie IDP rankings, combined offense plus IDP, 1QB and Superflex rankings and tiers. All the kind of stuff is up right now. So that's it for us. Like Nate said, we'll be back again later this week doing a Superflex rookie mock draft. But until then, peace out.